We're back again with another linguistic beauty of the Qur'an that proves the Qur'an's divinity. That the Qur'an can only be from God and not from any human. It cannot be a human production. So again, we'll be comparing two verses here. Beginnings similar, but the endings a bit different. Chapter number 2, Surah Baqarah, verse 18. They are willfully deaf, dumb, and blind, so they will never return to the right path. Summun bukmun umyun fahum la yarji'un. They will not come back. The same kind of words in the same chapter number 2, Surah Baqarah, verse 171. They are willfully deaf, dumb, and blind, so they have no understanding. This time the ending is they have no understanding. And if you see the Arabic, summun bukmun umyun fahum la ya'qilun. So why is it that it mentions the same words, deaf, dumb, and blind, but in one verse number 18, it says they will never return to the right path. In verse number 171, it says they have no understanding. The context matters. In chapter number 2, if you see the previous verse, it's talking about people who have lost their eyesight completely. Their example is that of someone who kindles a fire, but when it lights up all around them, Allah takes away their light. Allah takes away their light, leaving them in complete darkness, unable to see. If you're blind, if you can't even see, how are you ever gonna see the path, right? So it is more appropriate to say here they are willfully deaf, dumb, and blind, so they will never return to the right path. It's about seeing the way, right? The context is about seeing the way. However, if you see in the same chapter, verse 171, where it says they have no understanding in the end, if you see the previous verse, it says, when it is said to them, follow what Allah has revealed, they reply, no, we only follow what we found our forefathers practicing. Would they still do so even if their forefathers had absolutely no understanding or guidance? Now the context is about understanding and guidance. So rightfully it says they are willfully deaf, dumb, and blind, so they have no understanding. Also, this very verse, if you see, the example of the disbelievers is not responding to the messenger's warning is like a flock, not comprehending the calls and cries of the shepherd. Imagine, the flock is not actually blind that they cannot see the way, they cannot understand. The shepherd can say anything, he can speak human language, but they will not understand. You could read books in front of the flocks of animals, but they will not understand. So it's more appropriate to say here understanding. Subhanallah. Where the context was about understanding, the Quran rightfully says, so they have no understanding. Where the context was about not being able to see and being blinded, it rightfully says returning to the right path. They're blinded, so they cannot return to the right path. They are stupid, they cannot think. Right, the stupidity is mentioned here. They cannot comprehend what's being said, so they are no understanding. Subhanallah, perfectly in the context. And subhanallah, this is the beauty of language. Let me just tell you that I could see a beautiful scene, two different beautiful scenes, any specific scene, and I say it's beautiful. And I see another scene. Let's see, I see one scene in the ocean, and I say this is a beautiful scene. And I see another scenery in the desert, and I say it's beautiful. But both are general terms. If I come specifically to the context, that brings out the beauty of my language in describing. For example, I could just say the scenery is beautiful when I'm standing on the beach, or I could say the sunset or the light shining on the sea and the sun setting. I could describe it like this, right? The sunset was beautiful at the sea. And likewise in the desert, I could just say it's beautiful, or I could just say the sand dunes were something like that, describing the sand dunes or describing the horizon. Or describing the mirage, something like that, right? So when you come to specificity, it brings out the beauty in whatever the scenery is. Or you can just like here the verses could simply end, they're deaf, dumb, and blind, so they'll remain misguided. The same thing, they could just have used the general terms, but that's the beauty of language, to describe something in its context, and that's what brings out the beauty. So may God give us complete conviction in the Quran as the word of God. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.